Diane Johnson, Minister of State for Crime, Policing and Fire, is with us this morning. Good morning. It's nice to see you. Thank you for joining us. Your reaction to the farmers' protests today?
Well, I fully recognise there's a very strong feeling amongst the farming community about the changes that are being introduced. They've absolutely the right to come and protest and make their views clear. I know they're going to be lobbying Parliament today. But I think it's important to recognise that the decisions the Chancellor has taken are against the backdrop of an inheritance that we had in the summer, where we found £22 billion black hole in the public finances, and difficult decisions are having to be taken. And the effect of the changes for this community, for the farming community, as I understand it, are small. It's about 500 farms that will be affected. And there are all sorts of concessions around how any tax that's due will have to be paid over 10 years, interest-free, at a lower rate than in other circumstances. So I think the package as a whole is one that I understand the farming community are not happy with, but I think it is against that financial problem that we inherited.
So they're wasting their time?
Well, they're absolutely got the right to come and protest, and they're clearly...
But they're not going to change your mind?
Well, I think
collective mind.
The Chancellor is having to make difficult decisions, and she set those out in the budget on the 30th of October.
Even though you previously promised before you were elected that you wouldn't do this?
I'm not sure we particularly set out a promise around this issue.
You did.
Well, that's not my understanding.
Well, you did.
OK, well, it's not my understanding. And
so you broke your promise?
I think the Chancellor's been very clear that she is not breaking promises that she made in the manifesto.
But you promised before the election that you wouldn't do this, specifically this. Steve Reid promised actually last December that you wouldn't do this, and you have. So you've broken your promise.
Well, I don't accept that.
OK. 100 new Labour MPs have constituencies with a rural aspect. All have narrow majorities. You know, rich farmers are people that you represent now, and yet you're letting them down. And these are people that are responsible for our food supply.
Well, I think we do have a lot of MPs now who represent rural areas. I think that's absolutely right. And as the policing minister, one of the issues I'm concerned about is rural crime, and that affects communities, rich farmers and not so rich farmers, and the general public who live out in the countryside. So I want to make sure that we have a good offer around rural crime, our neighbourhood policing guarantee, making sure that we have those officers back on those neighbourhoods in those areas is really important, and that's one of the things I'm focused on.
How will you guarantee that there won't be food shortages leading up to Christmas?
Well, issues around food security are obviously national security issues. There are plans in place, there are contingencies always in place to deal with that. But I'm confident that that won't happen.
I wonder why the Chancellor doesn't want to meet with the farmers.
I'm a Home Office minister. I'm not party to any decisions about the Chancellor's diary.
Let me put it a different way. Why would the Chancellor not want to meet with farmers, given that it's such an important issue?
I'm not aware of any decisions about...
Do you think she should meet with the farmers? Let me put it that way.
Well, look, ministers meet with all sorts of people. I mean, I met recently with those who were interested in this agricultural machinery being stolen and what more we could do to protect farmers and those who work in agriculture to prevent them being victims of crime. So I think we all meet with lots of different interest groups, yes. OK, but given how important it is, given how it is critical for our food supply that the farmers are kept relatively happy, and we've seen this put in place, even though you promised last November that this wouldn't happen, don't you think it would be wise for the Chancellor to meet with farmers? Well, again, I think that ministers meet all the time with lots of different interest groups, including the farmers, and I'm sure Steve Reid, as the DEFRA Secretary of State, is meeting with them regularly, and I know the various ministers in DEFRA will be meeting with farmers.
OK. I'm just looking at my notes in a little bit more detail, and it was actually last November, forgive me, not last December, when Steve Reid had said purposefully that he would not axe agricultural policy, property relief, that tax loophole that we're talking about today. So you did say that you wouldn't do it. Well, and you have.
Can I just say, I'm a Home Office minister.
Yeah, but he should be sat here this morning, and he isn't. And you've got collective responsibility. You're representing the government this morning. You promised that you wouldn't do this, and you have.
But today we're making a big announcement about police reform.
And we'll come to that.
And that's...
What's important today is that 40,000 farmers are going to be on the streets of London because
Absolutely.
you made a promise to them ahead of the election that you wouldn't you wouldn't put this tax in place, and you have.
Right, OK, so I think it's really important to recognise today that the protests are taking place. The farmers are making their case to Parliament, to MPs, and I'm sure all MPs and ministers will be listening very carefully to what they have to say. But it has to be seen against the backdrop we inherited in July, where the public finances were in a terrible state and difficult decisions have had to be taken.
Of course, but you knew that. You knew that before you took charge.
I'm not sure we did know
and
that.
9 billion of that 22 billion was as a result of the money that you gave to doctors and other public sector workers. So we need to bear that in mind. But this is a government that makes promises that it won't keep.
Well, what I would say to you is the inheritance we had in July around the public finances was worse than we were expecting. And the Chancellor has had to take some really difficult decisions. She announced those in the budget. Obviously, the farming community are concerned and upset and are protesting today. That's absolutely right that they do that and they raise their concerns.
You make promises you can't keep. Talk to me about policing. What's Yvette Cooper going to say today?
So, major policing reform today, and this is really important, not just to urban areas, but to rural areas as well.
Farming's important as well, but
Absolutely, but it's really important that we get policing fit for the 21st century. The last reforms around policing were in the 1960s, and we know that society and crimes have changed enormously since then. One of the key things we're going to do is set up a police performance unit in the Home Office, so we actually get data about what's going on in our 43 police forces. And the example I just want to raise with you is that when I asked my officials to give me details about how many police officers had been injured over the summer in the riots, I was told that we don't have that central information. We'd have to write to 43 police forces. Now, we've got some very clear statements that we've made about what we want to achieve around our Safer Streets mission, halving violence against women and girls, halving knife crime over the next decade. So we need to have that performance data to be able to track that that's actually happening and support those police forces that are not performing as well as they should. So that's one part of this. The other part is a national policing body which will deal with the things that we can do better together, nationally or regionally. So forensics, IT, aviation, those are some key services that support policing that we could do better. And then the other issue is around collaboration and efficiencies and making sure that we get the right spend and we get value for money in the procurement that we undertake. Because 43 police forces doing their own thing means exactly for uniforms or energy costs or buying cars, police cars, you're not getting the best deal. So we could do that better together and reinvest that money back into policing.
Well, how are you going to vote on assisted dying?
How am I going to vote on assisted dying? I've thought very long and hard about this, and I think my instinct at the moment is that I do want to support the proposal that's been put forward by Kim Ledbetter. My big issue is around safeguards and making sure that nobody would feel forced into or compelled to take that action. So I'm looking at the bill, looking at the actual provisions in the bill, but my instinct at the moment is that I will probably support it. But I want to hear the debate as well.
OK, Minister, it's good to see you. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you.